I know we've touched on this subject really briefly in previous episodes, but I think it needs a whole episode. So, we're going to discuss ethical considerations in software development.
Hmm.
It's not touched on very often, but I feel like with the hype of AI in our last episode, this one just makes sense to talk about right
Oh,
now.
for sure. It's a huge problem.
And you hear a lot. I would say the most vocal person is Elon Musk about ethics in AI right now.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't really consider that. Like, where is AI getting their data from? What are they doing with it? And so, what does ethics mean in software development? And I would think you just have to be very aware of where you're getting your data from, what you're doing with your product, and who are you affecting anyone as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big one. I mean, it goes back to that idea of scientists were so busy trying to figure out if they could that nobody thought about if they should. And a lot of people, especially with the advent of smarter AI and all of these advancements, are really concerned about their futures and their jobs and how are they going to make money and how are they going to provide for their families or themselves. And I mean, even we've kind of fallen victim to that. I'm hoping that we pull through, but it's easy to freak out and be like, well, all these developer jobs are probably disappearing. And all of these artist jobs, I followed a lot of, I've mentioned this before, but I follow a lot of artists. And when Midjourney and Stable Diffusion were first becoming public, there were a lot of artists that were losing their commissions, and they were very vocal about, I've had steady work for a long time. All of a sudden, everybody's canceling on me and just using Midjourney. And so you have to think about the significance and the impact that you're having on people as a whole and on your end users while you're building things out. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't consider when they're building stuff, especially if they're just thinking, I'm just building something cool, you know?
Yeah, do you think they, like, not only obviously they're building something cool, but do you think they actually care as a whole if it's their thing that's cool?
I honestly don't think so, but that's
Like, I
just
think
based.
I think the tech industry kind of lacks in ethics and morals
Oh,
currently.
yeah. And I mean, look no further than what people do with data and respecting user privacy, because that is a thing that for years has been very underhanded by major companies, and they're not very transparent about it at all. And so data is one of those things that you have to consider. And you have to think about things like, okay, am I going to sell data? Because that's typically how a lot of people make money off of those types of apps. And on gathering all of that is they're selling that data to somebody else.
Yeah. And I think this subject you and I are very passionate about. And I wouldn't be surprised if we tracked down our relationship and when we became friends if it was about data privacy.
Probably.
Because I think from day one, we've always had issues with data collection and data privacy. Like, we understand, like, obviously we build apps, we have our own products. We know you need to collect data.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this in depth in previous episodes, but what data are you collecting? Are you overreaching with the data that you collect? Do you actually need that data to improve your product, or are you solely using your clients, or I should say your user base, as your cash product?
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of how we've gotten into this data hellscape that we're in, of major companies having every piece of info about you. I mean, I remember when we were working with that music social media company that we both worked with for a little bit. We were implementing Amazon's SDK for Amazon Music, and the amount of data that they collected from just, I'm streaming a song, was insane.
If I remember when we first started testing it, we got denied for not giving them enough data.
Yes.
We
did. And it was stuff like they needed to know every time the user pressed a pause button, and they needed to know every time the user swapped screens, and they needed to know every time they
they wanted to know overreaching data that is the app's information. That's the stuff you care about with your product. Why are we giving it to a third party?
Because they're providing an SDK for free.
I know.
It's the same thing as Firebase.
Yep.
I mean, every app that uses Firebase, its users now belong to Google.
Right.
Because it's tracking everything. Firebase is Google's keeping all of that data for themselves and using it for their own products, for advertising, for all that stuff. They're tying users together based on their IDs and their emails, even for separate services. If I open app A and I sign in with my email, and then I open app B and I sign in with my email, if both of them are using Firebase, Google is using that data to connect the two accounts and say, okay, well, Ben is on this app, and this is what he's doing on this app, and this is what he's doing on the other app. And when a company's providing an SDK like that for free, they're usually getting something out of it. And harvesting all of that data is what Amazon and Google and Facebook and like major OAuth providers are getting out of that.
Yeah. And as an app creator or platform creator, entrepreneur, whatever you are, these tools are appealing, right? They're free. They get you off the ground quick, but you have to bring ethics into consideration. What are you doing with your user base's data?
Yes. And so you have to be aware of that. And the other big thing is making sure that you're transparent about your data policies, what you're doing, how things work. I would rather know.
Sorry to cut you off, but your data policies are now whatever frameworks and tools you're using's data policies. You have to regurgitate those because you're doing it.
Yep. That's why we don't really use them.
Right.
And
we make our own, and we use our own analytics systems, and we do all of that because we don't want to, like, you might agree with their data policy when you first start using it, but they can change it on you anytime.
Oh, yeah.
And then are you tightly coupled to that tool? Like if you used Firebase, it's essentially a database, you would be stuck.
It is a pain in the butt to migrate from.
Yeah, because it doesn't work like a normal database.
They don't even give you a tool to do so from Firebase. You have to go pay for extra tools that other people have made to get out of the Firebase ecosystem. And it is a major pain.
Yeah, so I would say your ethics equal the tools you use.
It's the lowest common denominator of all the tools that you use.
Yep, exactly.
So you need to advertise that. You need to, if you're selling user data or if you're using any of these tools that might infringe on their privacy, you need to be clear about that.
Yes. And you also need to allow them to opt out and see what you're collecting. You should be able to go down a list and uncheck things.
Yep.
And if you can't control that, what you're collecting, you need to just be very clear that why you can't allow them to opt out of certain data collection.
I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but you need to make it really easy and accessible for people to view, because a lot of times companies will have a way for you to see all your data, but it's hidden behind a whole bunch of processes.
Yeah, it's buried. Like
you have to
look at Facebook or Instagram. Like if you want you to clear your data, it's at least like 3 tiers deep.
Or some companies, it's you have to send us an email and we'll get back to you with your data kind of thing. But you need to make sure, in my opinion, the ethical thing to do is to make it really easy and kind of in your face to see what data you're collecting so that users, one, know, and two, they can get rid of anything that they don't want in there. And it's not always like nefarious, and it's not always a major thing. For example, with YouTube. Okay. I'm on my YouTube channel. One of my kids jumps on my phone or whatever device that my YouTube channel is hooked to. They go watch some dancing fruit video. And now my whole search algorithm is messed up and it's looking for dancing fruit. videos. It's the
I
same
love how
kind
you
of
blame
principle.
your kids on that.
Okay. You're right. I put them on for Jacob. That's
Yes.
what's going on there. But it's the same idea of, yeah, you're logged into an account, but maybe that wasn't you.
Mhm.
Or maybe there's something you don't want other people to see. If I'm buying a present for my wife for her birthday or something, maybe I don't want it to be right there of, hey, your Amazon search history is this thing.
Yeah, for
Let
sure.
me put it in your face.
Nothing stops you from using anonymous data collection either, because at the end of the day, you normally just want to know how your app's being used.
Oh, yeah.
So wherever you don't actually need to know what account it's tied to, why even collect that?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that Firebase does, is they don't anonymize it. They just, hey, we're going to collect every little piece of data possible at all points in time.
For sure.
And we're going to tie it directly to the account. I mean, it's useful sometimes because I've had clients who insist on Firebase and they want Firebase, and that's what they're using. So we use it, and it does make it really convenient. If I get an email,
weird to me that someone would be like, I need Firebase.
It was a whole thing. I was not a fan, but it makes it really convenient when I get an email saying, hey, this user is having a problem, and it's just the user's name. It's not even their email, and I can go find their account in like 2 seconds. So, it is super convenient, not very ethical or...
Yeah. Well, you can also build your own tooling to tell you that an account's having trouble, right?
Yes.
You can do everything on your own.
It's true. And you can make it anonymous.
Yeah.
But the point is, a lot of these tools that people use don't anonymize anything. And they keep as much data as possible. And they don't make any effort to respect the privacy of whatever users are using your app.
You don't even have to fully make it anonymous, right? But you can have like user groups and things where you don't allow full access to everyone in your company that has data. They don't have to know things. But if there's an issue, you could make it a little more difficult to track down the account.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing to remember with all of this is there's the privacy aspect. There's also a security aspect, because all that data that's hanging out is a security risk. The more data you're collecting, the more at risk you are of security breaches. And if something happens, people's info getting out there that shouldn't, and you getting sued and all of that stuff. Yeah. And the important thing to remember is the data that you're collecting isn't yours.
Yeah. And so now that data is your highest priority to protect. So if you get hacked, you're responsible for losing all the data you collected on your user base.
Mm-hmm. And there are all kinds of big scary things that happen in the world today, like doxing and swatting and that kind of stuff. And if if they can directly prove, I got this info from this insecure app or this insecure website, then you could be held liable for that. Like, you could be implicated in legal action.
Yep. And like, it could be I shouldn't say as simple, but if you're like holding payment information wrong, and you lose
that's a big
thousands of credit card numbers, you're responsible for replacing. Like, you would be sued by most of those card holders.
And that's one of the reasons why we talk a lot about third party bad. But when it comes to payment stuff, that's why we use third party libraries.
If you can't afford a whole team, you need to...
Like, Stripe has a whole legal and security teams that are dedicated solely to keeping credit card data safe and all of the legal liabilities on them.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can have it.
And don't be storing any of the stuff that you don't need to store if you're using a third party.
Yep.
Because I want to say the biggest problem is I think a lot of people will use third party, one for like payments and stuff because it's convenient.
Oh yeah.
But then they don't think about it and they double store things. Like, you shouldn't store any payment information if you're relying on a third party to do it. Like, it's just silly. It's not worth the security risk of being hacked.
Oh yeah. So you want to do regular security audits to make sure that you're not storing any of that extra data, that you don't have anything you don't need. And like we've mentioned a billion times, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to dependencies.
Dependencies are probably the weakest link for security vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. Just like Postgres, we've mentioned in the past, the Docker image has a Trojan, right?
Yeah.
And it's as simple as not using their default username and password.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, now you've implemented a Trojan that you actually don't know how it's working. Like, I think it's a crypto mining Trojan or malware, whatever you want to call it. But it could be doing other...
That would make sense from the amount of computing power.
Right. But it could be another... It could do multiple things, too.
Yeah.
It could be taking all your data tables.
It could be.
Like, who knows? So you want to be on top of any dependencies that you're using. You want to make sure you're up to date. So any security breaches, especially with payment stuff and encryption libraries and things like that, you need to stay up to date on. So you want to have a list that you're constantly reading change logs on and understanding what updates are if those dependencies are in your platform.
100%. So we've talked a lot about data privacy and security, but another big ethical consideration with app development and with these systems is bias and discrimination. Bias can creep into software really easily, and often it can be embedded from the developer's own biases, and a lot of people like to tie that directly to political biases, and
especially today.
Yeah.
You can't get away from
everything is political
politics,
or racist or whatever.
Yep.
But bias can mean a lot of things, especially with software. And it's really easy for it to creep into apps and backends and especially AI algorithms. We talked a bit about AI in our last episode, and this is one of the big problems with it right now, is there are a lot of biases that are working their way into things like ChatGPT because it's based on an open pool of data from everywhere, and the internet as a whole has its biases. It's not always intended, it's not always political, but they happen, and it creeps into especially AI.
And sometimes it is intentional, and from a standpoint like AI or like ChatGPT, I think it'll be argued both ways, but I think from an ethical standpoint, you cannot allow biases of your developers or you creep in to change what you're delivering people.
Oh, 100%. I'm going to get us canceled here, but I've seen a lot of stuff with ChatGPT in specific of if you ask it a question about Trump, it'll say, I can't respond to that, and I can't show any political bias. I can't respond to that question. And then if you ask the same question about Biden, it'll go ahead and spit it out, and it's fine.
As long as it's positive.
Yeah, as long as it's positive.
It's been pretty apparent in the internet, at least in like the Twitter world. Left-leaning politics, if it's positive, you'll get a response. If it's negative, they'll tell you they can't respond. And then on the right, if it's negative, they'll respond, and it won't ever spit out positive. Yeah. And that's a very obvious bias. Biasness?
It's just bias. That's a pretty obvious bias.
But
so, you keep on shooting those shots.
I will. Well, I was trying to figure it out. None of it sounded right. So things like that, though, are important just for people trusting your product.
Oh, yeah. Because the result of that is a lot of right-leaning people are looking at ChatGPT and going, well, how can I trust anything that you're spitting out?
And then you get an extreme version of the right using, OpenAI or another AI platform. And we get in this stupid battle of right versus left.
Yeah.
And then the majority of us are sitting here in the middle and be like, dude, I just want to have honest and open conversation or like opinions. And I don't mind if they don't align with mine. I just want to know.
I would just like the actual facts.
Right.
Please.
Like I'm okay if my opinion's proven wrong. I can handle it.
I'll be okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it says a lot about your platform, whether you like intend it to be a positive or a negative. Because a lot of us, we get stuck in our circles and you think that's like your think tank is the way everyone's think tank works.
Yeah, and it's not.
It's not.
And if you have those biases in there and if they're easily visible, then people are just going to assume nefariousness.
Mhm.
They're going to assume that you are doing it on purpose. So some of the things that you can do as an app developer or as a business owner to kind of prevent those biases from creeping in is, one, check your own bias. Because obviously,
Don't purposely implement them. That's the easy one.
that's super easy. The second one is to have blind samples. And what I mean by that is, if you take a phrase or you take a response or whatever, and you blank out the name or any indicator of which side it is or what, and it's not even just political. It could be scientific discussions. It could be artistic discussion. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you blank out the subject, does it sound biased? Because a lot of the problem with ChatGPT, like we mentioned, was if you put in the president's name and it's positive, then you get a response. If you ask it the exact same question about Trump, you don't get a response.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you cover up the name in that, what changes in the outcome? And that's something that you can monitor.
Yeah, another good way to do it would be have like a review board where you have multiple opinions, different biases on that review board that can all deem things not biased or, very, what's the word? What am I going for?
I don't know.
You can just all agree on that you're delivering data in the most honest and respectful way, right?
Yeah.
If you have a review board of like 10 people, it doesn't even have to be that many, but just make sure that you vary it from.
It needs to be a somewhat diverse group of people.
Diverse, that's a word I was trying to.
And they can do things like the blind samples and requiring sources, that kind of thing. And they can all take care of that. But it can't just be one person is the source of ethics and the source of, is it biased or not? Because their own bias is going to alter the outcome.
Yeah, and how you handle that data, like your algorithms you use, be very transparent with how they work and how it returns data. That's super important.
Yeah. You don't have to get super specific with it. Like, you don't have to go and say, this is exactly how the code looks. Right. In fact, that's not recommended. But you do need to be transparent about, this is what we do with it at a high level. This is what's going on. That way people at least know.
Like obviously, especially in the AI world and machine learning, things get really complicated. But you can have a nice little like flow chart that explains the process of an algorithm.
Yep. So those are all good ideas on how to kind of prevent that from creeping into your app. And it's pretty obvious that wasn't really a consideration with a lot of the AI and machine learning tools that we have today.
You know what would be nice and actually should be a requirement? Wherever the data was scraped from, it should be required.
Should cite the sources.
Yes, it should cite the sources.
That would be great.
Like, even if it was like 50 sources, it would be awesome to see it.
Yeah, and especially, I get, people probably get tired of this, but I get very passionate about AI art because I hate it.
It's like you've never talked about this before.
Right?
But yeah, they should have to cite the artists.
But they should have to cite which artists they pulled from.
Yep.
And there are actually some tools out there that they are intended for the artist to use. It's not like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion where we're going to go pull from a pool of artists that we scraped and nobody gets any credit except for Midjourney. It's you load it up with your own art and then it can generate AI art for you that looks like your work, but it's not just out there in the sea of anybody can do it. It's using you as the primary source. Mm-hmm. So that's fine. Go for it. Anything to help artists' jobs be easier, fine, great.
Right. I'm all about tools to make life easier.
It's the concern comes in with Joe Schmo off the street says, I want a painting like this in the style of Picasso. And then he puts it up and says, I've been training as a Picasso style artist for years and this is my output. Like,
Yeah.
it's the absolute poser lying attitude where the problem comes in. And with how the data was gathered for all of these tools and how it all came to be, there's a whole lot of shady shit everywhere in the process.
Yeah, and everyone seems to be blind or ignoring that aspect. Like, why aren't we discussing the ethics of these companies more? Why isn't it louder?
Mm-hmm.
Only the people that have been directly attacked are talking about it.
Yeah. Well, and I find it funny because there's kind of this double standard going on. AI art and all of this stuff, and AI coding, but we'll get there in a second. That's all. We're just going to turn a blind eye.
Well, everyone is like, well, yeah, it sucks, but it's great for me.
Yes.
Until it's them, right?
If you look at like social media platforms, if there's anything that any political side, anybody doesn't agree with, any ethics concerns, people are all over it and they're happy to cancel companies over the smallest thing.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, we ripped off literally millions of artists and they're not getting a dime for their work. Oh, that's fine.
Right.
Because it's helping me start a print-on-demand company.
Yeah, and then like, so it's easy for me to sit here and be like, well, I'm not an artist. It doesn't really affect me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty dumb because then you look at things like Copilot and
oh yeah,
even the coding ability on ChatGPT. Where are they getting the code from? They're scraping things like Stack Overflow.
Well,
repositories.
Copilot is coming directly from GitHub repositories.
Yep, private or not.
There was a badge that I got. Actually, I have 2 GitHub accounts.
Mm-hmm.
One that I abandoned for personal reasons after Deb Slopes died. But that account has some Unity code in it. And that account got a badge, and I didn't understand what that was about at the time. I was just kind of thinking, oh, that's cool, I guess. And it was, some of my code was committed to the time capsule.
And you didn't opt into that.
And I didn't opt into it.
It's
And I was like,
user
oh,
agreement.
Okay, that's weird, but cool. I guess my code's going to be there. And I went and looked after Copilot was announced, and I found my code getting generated by Copilot. And I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So like, people think that AI can steal art and copy, so writers and artists, but it's going to take everyone's.
Yeah, as long as it's not directly affecting you, you don't care.
Right.
But that's the problem, is you don't care, and then it becomes this slippery slope that eventually engulfs everything.
And now you can't care when it does affect you.
Yep. Because a lot of people are sitting there going, oh, well, you know, artists can go get a real job, which I don't agree with that statement at all.
Well, whenever someone says get a real job and you actually can provide for your family, that's the silliest thing to say. It's kind of like COVID lockdowns when they deemed essential workers. Everyone's job is essential to putting food on their table.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about? Now we're going to be canceled.
Right. But yeah, it's easy to not care when it's not directly affecting you. And that's the funny thing to me, is when OpenAI first was getting popular, you know, and ChatGPT was on the rise and all of that stuff, there were a bunch of developers who claimed to have worked for OpenAI that I saw tweets and crap from, where they were basically gloating about how they are apex predators in the coding world and they are taking jobs from all these developers who don't deserve them. And it's just like, what?
Dude, what a weird...
Wow.
What a weird thing. Like,
first off, you're an asshole.
But the thing is, sure, they're probably really smart guys, but at one point they weren't.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And right now they're not smart guys.
Right.
Because, great, you've created a system that's generating code. What do you think it's going to do to you?
Right. You're not above it or in front of it, at least not for long. Yeah. So it's important. Like, I know we went on a tangent with AI probably longer than we should have. But as far as like ethics, you have more power than you think, or you need to be more aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think the AI stuff is just illustrating
it's
the
very
main
obvious.
point
Yeah.
of you need to be careful what you're doing, and you need to consider what you're doing before you do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same whether it's AI, whether it's a system that you're building, whether it's data privacy, whether it's security. You need to be really aware of the ethical implications of your actions, because if you have a system or an app or whatever that has a large user base, every action you make is going to affect them in some way.
Right. And it might not be as obvious as someone buys something from your site, you immediately like tweet out and dox their address.
Right.
But yet, like, if you're allowing a lot of data to be collected from that user,
then you're running that risk.
You are kind of doing that, especially if like you're handing it to Google or Fabric or Pixel, any of these analytic programs you don't control. Or
for sure.
AWS when they require way more information than you want to give them. Like, you're making me feel gross.
Right. So yeah, just be aware of what you're doing before you do it and the implications of your actions.